I kind of hold on to the fact that there's a lot of passion and there's a lot of conviction, there's a lot of families, and therefore that means next generations. That's what makes it almost a foregone conclusion that this is not I wonder if things are going to change. It's more a when, and how painful do we want it to be?
Hello, Katie. How are you?
I'm really well. I am very excited about today's guest, arguably the superstar of the world of neurodiversity, Ben Branson, perhaps better known as Seedlip Ben, the founder of the non-alcoholic drinks company, and a huge star in our sphere because of all the campaigning that he's done.
Yeah, he's the founder of the non-alcoholic drinks company Seedlip, but also he's the founder of the Hidden 20% charity and podcast. And he's a really interesting character in terms of, what he's done with his businesses, but specifically the charity, how he campaigns for better understanding around neurodiversity. And I think be fascinating to talk to him today. One of the things I'm most interested to talk to him about is how he manages to sort of juggle all these different elements of life while at the same time having ADHD, and he's autistic as well. And I think he's also really well placed to talk to us about the sort of changing landscape of the conversation around ADHD, sort of where we are with the media response, the backlash to it, and also what sort of changes he's seen in terms of people's attitudes to neurodiversity. He's a really interesting character. We're going to talk to him a bit about his story and a bit about the Hidden 20% charity. We'll speak to Ben Branson in a moment. Ben, so lovely to have you. Thanks for joining us, and really looking forward to talking to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sam, Katie, for having me.
The place I want to start is with the hidden 20%. Now, this may sound like a strange question coming from two people with ADHD, but tell me about the 20%, who we are, and why it's so important for you to tell other people who we are.
So, news flash bomb drop, we might have to change our name. We've been doing a lot of prevalence research recently. The globally quoted figure is that 15 to 20% of the world, of the population, adults and children, are neurodivergent. We do challenge that. That has not been tested. And the origins of that date back to the appendix of a dyspraxia self-help book, written over 20 years ago. And then kind of looked at as a sentence in a review paper in 2020. We do not know, therefore, we do not actually know how many people are neurodivergent. We can't even really define what comes under the umbrella of neurodivergence. And so, yeah, we've been doing a lot of modeling and a lot of work into that kind of prevalence figure, because if we don't know how many, how do we know what size support we should be putting in place?
So what are the figures then? Where do you think we are more likely to be? If it's not 1 in 5, you think it's more than that. How many are we?
So we've done, what have we done now? Over 100 episodes of the Hidden 20% podcast. That's over 200 hours of effectively, as I see it, research interviews, right? I'm sitting down, not knowing a lot, and learning, and being able to learn from some of the world's best researchers, experts, psychologists, professors, and hear people's stories. And when you start asking people, what do they think about the sort of 15 to 20%, and then I start asking other people who maybe don't know so much, you start getting, and you don't listen to the media narrative of overdiagnosis and kind of all that nonsense. You kind of, everybody goes, yeah, of course it's more, isn't it? Of course it's more. And I've heard that across every single sector as well, whether it's construction, banking, legal, the arts, sport, music, architecture. I mean, every single industry seems to also kind of go, no, there's a lot more of us. We then did our first piece of research just before Christmas, working with an AI intelligence agency. Sounds sort of CIA kind of stuff, but effectively looking at over 150 studies, reports, NHS data, government studies, charity reports over the last sort of 10 years in, ADHD, autism, dyslexia, the whole kind of gamut. And specifically looking at what do the prevalence rates, what are they talking about there? And you get, everything from ADHD is 2% to 7%. When you add that up globally, that's nearly 500 million people difference. So that was interesting just to kind of see that there is this kind of real dissonance between lots of different studies and the numbers not really stacking up. We know how many people are on wait lists. We know some of the stats that King's College proved, for example, that I think 99% of autistic people, over the age of 50 are not diagnosed, for example. We've seen Sweden come out with their study that, and I'm paraphrasing, and this is autism specific, that it's boys and girls and it's the same. Holy shit, who'd have thought that? And then we also know that there's this other emerging dimension that is, until in 2012, I could not be ADHD and autistic. I was not allowed to be.
They were siloed.
They were absolutely siloed. And guess what? That's just ADHD and autism. And guess what? You can be ADHD and dyslexic and dyspraxic and have Tourette's, so
it's highly likely that you will have lots of those things running concurrently. Yeah. I mean, we Sam and I talk about this, the fact that we've been talking to each other in this form for 3 years now. And so much has changed in just those 3 years. And, when we first started making it, we were disagreeing about our own experiences. But the way in which we describe, I realise that a lot of people who are ADHD listen to us for the ADHD aspects of their personality. I used to talk about my husband being autistic. He's undiagnosed autistic, but I see very clear elements of ADHD in his behaviour. And I think it's a really unhelpful way in which we divide all of these different things up, because you're kind of denying people's lived experience as much as anything, aren't you? And that can make life very difficult.
We have one brain, and yet we've separated out all of these fragments and we've over-medicalized them, when actually it is, I have one brain. It's not ADHD and autistic, or ADHD one day or autistic the next day. I have one brain, and it has a way of being and a way of communicating and a way of processing information.
Can we talk about that, Ben? Can we talk about, your diagnostic story? What were the crisis moments for you, and at what point did you realize it was time to start exploring autism/ADHD? What happened to you?
So I went for an autism assessment at 39. I'm now 43. And the car crash of what had happened, which is what happens downstream from unrecognized neurodivergence. Bullying, exclusion, abuse, addiction, self-harm, suicide attempts, sectioned, rehab, homeless, hospitalization. That is what comes downstream from unrecognized neurodivergence. That is my story. And that, unfortunately, is not an unusual story. And the bit that we have, I'm all for, extolling the virtues of thinking differently. I'm all for going, did you know about Newton? Did you know about the telephone? Did you know about the Wright brothers? Did you know about Marie Curie? Did you know about all these amazing contributions to society from people that thought differently or think differently? I am, but I feel like we've glossed over the fact that as an autistic person, I am 25 times more likely to attempt suicide than the average person. And so, yeah, there is a crisis, and we can celebrate weeks and we can kind of say, look, we've got skills and we can contribute and there are strengths, but we also need the government, healthcare, education, employers to understand that this is a crisis. And
I hear you so clearly on that. As as my own story is one of this not in any way being positive when I came to diagnosis. And I would say in the last few years since I've been diagnosed and I've learned more about it, there's some real positives, and I'm in a good place. But it wasn't at all. Yeah. And I wanted just to drill into that, if it's okay with you, how you came from that story that you've just described to being able to then seek diagnosis. Because, the great shame is that for so many people, they don't then get that diagnosis, they don't then get those answers. So what was it for you that then led you from that life to being able to say, I'm going to seek a diagnosis?
Yeah, so interestingly, my story is that I looked into going for an autism assessment first, not in crisis at all. I looked into an autism diagnosis out of curiosity. And I guess I'd had so many questions about myself and about my brain and about the way I did things over my life that I didn't have answers to. And so I'm forever questioning everything. And therefore, I guess I heard there was a guy in the drinks industry. He'd been diagnosed autistic and ADHD. He'd been quite vocal about that. I liked this guy. I liked talking to him. I got on with him. And so that sort of sowed a seed. And then 6 months later, I heard a founder who's autistic talking on a podcast. I started relating to kind of what he was saying. And I guess I just found myself Googling. And this had nothing to do with ADHD at this time. This was very autism focused. My wife was 8 months pregnant with our third daughter. And I called the drinks industry guy up and I said, Ian, where did you get your diagnosis? How does this happen? And so he put me in touch with someone. And I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell my wife. I just thought, I'm going to go through the process. Let's see. There's nothing, I don't feel like there's anything wrong with me, but I would quite like some answers. And that autism diagnosis definitely gave me, a hell of a lot of answers. It did explain a lot. And then 6 months later, I got an ADHD diagnosis. And then I guess the full penny dropped. Like, oh, okay, I get it. I've got a couple of names for my brain. That's it. But actually, it's how does that explain things to me? And therefore, I'm able to be myself, be kinder to myself, and help my children and explain how I work best to other people to therefore get what I need. So yeah, mine hasn't been I'd had all the crisis. All my crisis happened up to 25. And so, yeah, this was very much out of curiosity and I was very ignorant. I had no idea. I'd never heard the word neurodiversity before. I didn't know what they meant.
I mean, it's interesting sitting listening to you, because I know that there will be people listening to this podcast thinking, but he's the guy who set up Seedlip. He's running multiple businesses. Everything looks so easy to him. And I'll be honest with you, Ben, I'm also sitting here thinking that, because I'm slightly in awe of the fact that you can, but no, I know. So can you explain how, with an ADHD or ADHD brain, you're able to do something so huge as set up a business and run a successful international business?
Good question. And I don't I definitely don't have it all together. And it might be interesting to kind of just unpack some of the things that I struggle with that are really normal things. Like, I am highly anxious most of the time about things that most people probably aren't anxious about. But I don't like leaving the house. I don't have a social life because it's too exhausting and it's too anxiety creating. I try not to leave to go traveling. The last 4 times I've been on holiday with my family, I've been in shutdown and not been able to even freaking talk. I've definitely not figured all of this out. But I'm not beating myself up about that. I'm kind of like, that's just part of what I'm trying to learn, of being myself and not masking and not driving myself into the ground by having to pretend the whole time. And so I'm kind of okay with that. But Seedlip was this incredible journey and experience of, not really even deciding to set up a business and not wanting to get into the drinks industry, and it being nothing actually to do with creating non-alcoholic drinks to begin with. I'm autistic. I have special interests. I like getting deep into stuff, and I was getting deep into herbs and botanicals and then very deep into distillation that had nothing to do with making drinks. But I guess I followed all I've done, and this is true for the hidden 20%, this is true for the drinks businesses now, is it doesn't feel like work because it is something I am so highly interested in and passionate about, that has both a selfish aspect of I get to learn, and I'm obsessed with trees. I know a lot about trees and I want to know more. I've made them into drinks, but I get to learn about trees and I get to make something that people enjoy, hopefully. I don't know, Katie, I'm constantly trying to figure this out. The Seedlip thing, I was burnt out most of the time. I did enjoy some of it, but I spent a lot of time crying on planes and traveling around the world, and I didn't see my family, and I put everything into it, absolutely everything, to try and prove that I could see something through, and totally driven by a fear of failure.
I'm interested in the sobriety side of it. I remember the very first time I ever heard of Seedlip. Friends had come for the weekend, and a friend was doing that thing of not drinking for a few months just to see whether or not life was a bit easier. It turned out, surprise, surprise, life was a bit easier. And he arrived with a bottle of Seedlip and said, "Oh my God, I'm completely obsessed with this." And you did somehow manage to do that extraordinary thing of making not drinking cool suddenly. But I'm interested in what drove that process. Was it driven by giving alcohol up because that helped you? Because, we know, Sam and I both drink alcohol, but I am aware I have more and more friends who have ADHD who are finding sobriety a helpful place. And is that where it started for you?
Short answer, no. I stopped drinking alcohol basically after I left school, and I thought alcohol was really cool at school. It was really cool to drink alcohol and go to parties and steal alcohol from home and buy beers at school and try and get fake ID and go to the pub. And I thought that was really cool. And to be honest, drugs were for losers. And I left school and found drugs and never looked back. And so I don't drink alcohol. I haven't had an alcoholic drink for a long, long time, like probably nearly 20 years. But Seedlip, Silver, Season, our new brands, it's got nothing really for me to do with sobriety, whether you drink alcohol or you don't drink alcohol. To me, it's about, I get to just geek out about nature, and I want people to feel included, and I want people to socialize, and I know how important people connecting is. And I'm not the first one to kind of be struck by the irony that I hate socializing, yet it's something I'm absolutely fascinated in observing, right? Of like, come on, we need to get together, but not me.
Yeah, you do that over there and you have a lovely time, but leave me the hell out of it.
I'll watch.
I think the most powerful thing that anyone can say, honestly, when we're talking about neurodiversity is that you're still figuring things out. And you said that quite clearly. In terms of the figuring out, you look back, and we're talking here, we're asking you to deep dive into your whole life, but you've talked about periods of crisis. You've talked about this sort of interest-driven curiosity with setting up a business. You've talked about the need and the passion for building this charity. Can you look at your journey, if you want to use that phrase, and see where your ADHD and where your autism have helped and hindered? Can you see the changes since diagnosis? Is that something that is really obvious to you? Do you look back at your life and go, okay, that was because of this, or that was because of this, or I didn't do that because of such and such?
I mean, I was the last to know, right? And when I think about, I saw my first psychiatrist at 8, and I've been in therapy, seen countless, been in lots of rehabs, hospitals, seen lots of medical professionals and psychologists, and no one has ever mentioned any of this. But yet, when I look back, I can see all the impulsivity and the recklessness and the risk taking. And I can see all my collections, and I can see, for some reason I was collecting beer bottles at like 10 years old, and beer mats and Lego, and obsessed with making dens and making them better each time, and spending a long time making gold and taking things apart and making them. I wasn't interested in trains, right? Or airplanes, but I constantly wanted to make things and take them apart and solve problems. And I was academic, and I was very good at sport, and that helped me a lot. And I learned how to mask, not that I was aware of it, but I definitely could go under the radar as, he's a bit naughty, he's a bit lively, but he's smart and he's capable, and so he's okay.
Yeah, we'll let it go.
There's no problem. So yeah, I can. I think I guess in answer to your question, Sam, I'm definitely more myself now than I've ever been. I don't, for example, feel the constant need to make eye contact with someone in a conversation. Small thing, huge energy, right? Huge energy. And so I do feel more myself, and that's good. And that means I can be kinder to myself, and I'm less judgmental of myself in that respect, and more, hey, look, this is kind of who I am. And, I can be very blunt and direct, and I need to kind of watch that sometimes, and watch how I model that to my children.
And what about neurodiversity in the businesses that you have created and are creating? How have you made space for that amongst your workforce, and how have you found neurodiversity beneficial to the businesses that you run?
So was sort of doing it without realizing it. And I haven't done any internal email, for example, for over 10 years. We don't have WhatsApp groups.
Oh, imagine.
Yeah.
It's my bugbear. Emails. I'm dreadful. The number of producers at work who've had to say to me, Katie, do you read your emails? No, I forget. I'm allergic to the way they are, the disclaimers and all the information. Oh, my God. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah,
having a moment.
That's a lot. That's a lot of wasted time. And also this was obviously a lot prior to COVID, a lot of remote working, a lot of, we would get everybody together in the business on a Monday, and everybody would come into the office. We wouldn't have lots of meetings. We would actually just catch up. We would actually just have a coffee together. And it seems really unproductive, but actually that time together when everything was going so fast and is so intense was actually just nice to actually say hello, see each other, and it not be so go, go, go all the time. So actually it was quite, I like to think anyway, when I look back, it was quite a neuro-inclusive place to begin with, because that was just part of, I guess, how my brain was then putting a culture in place. Now, the charity is 3 full-time people, 3 brilliant people. We are fully neurodivergent team, which is brilliant. And we don't talk about individual neurotypes. What we talk about is, how do you like to receive information? Like Phoebe, our producer, she loves voice notes. I don't want to send her a whole load of copy. She's like, just voice note me. I can read the transcription and listen to it. Best way of receiving information. That's amazing. That doesn't matter what name she has for her brain. That's just like, how are we going to work together best? So that's something that, we've kind of got into our groove, I think, with as the charity. And then actually we're mostly a neurodivergent team on the drinks as well. And you guys will know, right? Look, like attracts like.
Yes. Radio buildings are full of us. Full to bursting, of all different kinds of neurodiversity. They're on both sides of the glass, aren't they, Sam? They are everywhere.
Yeah. And we've always been here. We are everywhere, and we've always been here. This is not a kind of, let's talk about it all the time. Let's talk about it every day. Let's over-engineer it. Well, what do you need? How can we help? It's not that. But it is a real allowance and permission to be yourself, and therefore, I believe, do your best work.
Yes. And ultimately, that is going to be best for business. Any
Correct.
kind of business, isn't it? If you're getting the best out of your employee by giving them what they need, and those will probably most likely be teeny tiny adjustments, you're going to do better.
Yeah. Feeling like you can speak up, feeling like you can be heard, feeling like you can say, I've got an appointment this morning, actually, so I won't be coming in, or I can't take that call then, or that's too late, actually, for me, or I don't know, and maybe that's not the best way to build, the biggest startups and go super fast. But I do think it's a better way of building better foundations and a happier, high-performing team, which is all I'm interested in, is let's be really proud of our work and perform at the highest level. How do we do that? I think you let people feel comfortable and safe and to be themselves. And we're lucky, we're small. This is not a big organization. So it's much harder, with huge, big corporates where...
Well, that really helpfully sort of circles us back to the start of our conversation. You were talking about this idea that we've got one brain and sort of looking at how people need to process information and how we need to communicate with people. And I think that is always the conversation that Katie and I have. And it leads us nicely on to sort of looking at where we are with ADHD in terms of public perceptions, in terms of latest research, that kind of thing. So what we're talking about is treating people as individuals rather than labels. I mean, if you want to put it as sort of in journalist speak like that. But how do we do that on a large scale? Because it's okay for Katie and I to do that. It's okay to do that perhaps in a small startup. But ultimately, when we're looking, as you said earlier, for resources or we're looking for medical treatment, there needs to be sort of clear delineation so that we can help people. So how do we get to a society where we are able to help individuals be their best without sort of dropping them into silos or camps? And that's a big question, Ben. I'm not expecting you to have all the answers, but, what's your thoughts on that?
I I think we would do really, really well to spend a bit more time standing on the shoulders of giants of what's been before. And whilst not perfect, there are 5 other dimensions of human diversity that we can look to. And I'm talking about things like gender, race, sexuality, disability, mental health, where we can actually kind of go, do you know what? We've come a hell of a long way, and it's really easy to forget how it used to be. Really easy to forget how it used to be. And especially as younger generations come through that didn't even experience what was going on historically. So I do think there's an aspect of, hold on a minute, what can we learn from those movements? What can we learn from what worked, what didn't work? One thing that screams out to me is, for the most part, this is about identity and is not about medical, clinical diagnosis. And so I think if we stay rooted to this idea that this is all disorders and clinical and medical and conditions and all this sort of stuff, then I'm not sure we're going to be able to ever celebrate this wonderful side of human brains and diversity and difference. So that's one thing, and that's a difficult thing to do, right? To move this from out of a hospital and like into being part of someone's identity. But I think it's a really crucial journey that we've got to go on. And look at mental health, right? We were in schizophrenia, bipolar, anxiety and depression, and that was kind of it. And you had to go and see proper professionals, and there was drugs involved. And now you talk about mental health, and it can be meditation to depression to all kinds of, it's a big, broad topic. We would do also well, I think, to frame this in neurodiversity rather than the siloed, fragmented individual neurotypes. So that the banner, the kind of the beacon and the kind of masthead is neurodiversity. That's got nothing to do with disorders and clinical definitions. That is much more about difference, I guess, and diversity, which we do have we know about that. We do know, we have departments within big corporates. There's lots of funding and, I think and that's a journey that we, Hidden 20% wise, we want to be part of. Like, we want to help foster and fuel and take initiative on, that moves. I was at Parliament a few weeks ago, and there was a very well-respected psychiatrist, and he was sat there going, you don't need super experts like us to assess this kind of stuff. You don't. Look, you all know people who you've met, and within 5 minutes you could have a sense. And I'm not,
ADHD
that's not to, exactly, that's not to like minimize it or trivialize it or get into like, oh, everyone's got ADHD. It's not to go down that route.
But it's a bit like when schools say we treat a pupil for what they need rather than treating them with a diagnosis. I see what you mean by that, yeah.
Yeah, and we should not need a diagnosis to get support. We should be able to be
needs-based.
It should, and person-centered, needs-led, and that's quite grey, right? That's quite, if you think, okay, what do I do with that? What does that mean? But what it does mean is it's not about who's in and who's out. That is one thing that it's
an inclusive space and can bring everyone in, no matter what level, or because some people don't qualify for a diagnosis, but they still have challenges and struggles and might need little tweaks at work. One aspect of that troubles me a little bit is the backlash that we seem to be seeing in some places. I mean, obviously there's the whole it's being overdiagnosed. We know that's not true. But we've also got the we just need to send them off to a decent army school and basically beat the ADHD out of them, and they'll be fine.
Extreme example, Katie. Thank you.
Well,
Let's carry on.
but those are some of the those are essentially the conversations that
Makes
kind
the
of
point.
the old-fashioned people have about ADHD, don't they? That ultimately it's naughty children who just need taking in line, right?
Not in my day. Not in my day.
Oh, and I feel very positively actually about things right now, but there are still these whispers across the pond and also here about what ADHD really is and how we should be talking about it and what the future might look like if it was in the wrong hands. And I wonder if you have any of those same kind of, if you're troubled in the same way, if you have any of those misgivings about, because I agree with you, the conversation is so much better now than it was in all of the areas that you've just discussed. But I think we know that those rights and those conversations can never be taken for granted, can they?
No, and we tend to go, we always seem to take things to extremes, don't we? And so, that's where you get the everyone suddenly got ADHD. The AI research that we did looked into some of the history around the social media narrative of where that's all come from. And so interesting, really, that this whole movement actually kicked off COVID and TikTok, right? It's only like 5 years old, 6 years old, actually. And so it is so new and so fresh. And given that social media is conditioning us to, it's quick, it's sharp, it's short, it's dopamine seeking, it can be trivial. Actually, what that has done is sort of not help the seriousness of ADHD, for example. And I come back to the point on, as ADHDers, our prospects and the outcomes are not as good as the rest of the population. And that's not trivial, and that's not everyone. And it's not okay that a large percentage of people in prison are ADHD and not supported or undiagnosed. Like, that's not okay.
And it's not in society's interests to ignore that either. This is the thing I cannot get my head around. If we don't have the conversation about that, that will just continue. And it
Correct.
costs us all, right, to have all of those people doing time in jail because they haven't got the support. Simple things in place in school or after they leave school to keep them safe and mentally well supported in work. And
if you look at the prevalence and you kind of go, okay, let's call it 5% of people in the UK are ADHD. And then you go, but that's costing the government £17 billion a year. 5% of people. That's it. 17 billion. And don't even get me started when you add in autism, the DISs, Tourette's, and then take it further into OCD, PTSD, bipolar. Like, it costing an extraordinary amount of money that it's not about just eradicating that, but it is about, if we can get upstream, then I think we could help people, therefore help society, save money, and people can contribute. I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but
no, I think that makes perfect sense, Ben. But how do you feel about how that message is being received? Because we're absolutely on that train, which is that this benefits everyone. But do you think that message is getting through? Do you think the backlash is getting worse? I've got a sense that actually there's ADHD fatigue a bit. People have sort of got to the sense of going, oh, everyone's talking about ADHD. How do you feel that message is getting through?
I just think that the media have such power. Right? There's such power in headlines and what then carries over into social and travels across digital. There's such power and not enough responsibility. And because it's been minimized and because it's been trivialized, we're ending up creating this vicious circle of like everyone's kind of ADHD, and then you get the silly memes on TikTok, and then people roll their eyes, and then people don't want to disclose, and then the shame comes, and it basically just creates this really vicious cycle. And we're forever having new reports coming out, and I guess the public aren't seeing any action. So there's lots of reports, there's lots of amazing people in this space doing lots of amazing work, but perhaps not enough change yet, and not enough, probably not enough action or not enough consequence. And I think that makes it really easy for the media and for the media narrative to make fun of it, which is what I think they do.
Yeah, I think you're right. But then I also hear what you said earlier about how far we've come in such a short space of time. And in that sense, would you say that you're broadly positive about the direction we're headed with that conversation?
I am, because as much as there's the horror, there's also a lot of hope. And one thing I have been, we've got 300,000 people now in our community. And one thing I hand on heart categorically know is that as a body of people where social justice is a very, very strong common thread and nerve, people will speak up, excuse the language, and people are not going away, and they are now not being quiet, and they care a lot, deeply, because they're suffering and they're hurting, and their loved ones are hurting, and they want to be heard. The three words we get the most feedback we get is "I feel seen." Like those three words are what comes to us so much.
Yeah, we get that. We get a lot of messages along those lines into the podcast too.
Someone singing your song is got to be one of the most powerful, inclusive things that you don't even realize is happening, right? Unless someone tells you that, hey, thanks for singing my song. We've got all of this happening in kind of people's headphones and on the drive to work and on the way back. And I love what podcasts can do, and I love what media can do. Our wish, or our kind of part of our shift as a charity is, great, let's talk to many, not individually, one-to-one.
To each other.
So that, exactly,
yeah.
so that
let's
we can
open up the conversation.
We can rally the troops, as it were, or mobilize this to. So I and that's what I hold on to, Sam. I kind of hold on to the fact that there's a lot of passion, and there's a lot of conviction, and there's a lot of families, and therefore that means children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, next generations. Like, this is so intersectional and across the whole of society that's what makes it almost a foregone conclusion that this is not I wonder if things are going to change. It's more a when, and how painful do we want it to be in terms of that change? Because it's coming, and we're not going to shut up now, right? We are not.
Absolutely. And on that, we could talk to you forever. We probably should start to bring this conversation to a close. But I want to respond to what you've just said, because, I can be totally honest, and we try and be as honest as we can on this podcast. Katie's a sort of campaigner. She's a lifelong campaigner. That's what she does, and I don't think I was. I made this podcast because I wanted to figure out what ADHD was. And it's only since making this podcast and the people getting in touch and saying to me what it's meant to them, but also then validating me as well in terms of the experiences I've heard from people, that's made me realise the importance of these conversations. And, particularly I talk about your charity, Hidden 20%. Getting that conversation out there is so important, because it not just changing the narrative, is also changing the way that young children who are in school today think and talk about themselves. And I have seen in the past few years from making this podcast how important that is, that actually there's a generation who don't have to grow up feeling about themselves in the way that I did. Yeah. And I think, what you're doing with the charity and what these conversations are doing is so important for the next generation ultimately.
It is. And, my middle daughter, River, was diagnosed autistic last year. She's 6, and she doesn't think that's bad or good. It just is, right? And that's how I think about it. It's not, I kind of reject the superpower narrative. I'm not interested in that. And I also reject the idea that I'm totally broken and useless and kind of cannot contribute to society. It just is. And lucky me, I've got a name for my brain, like, great. But yeah, I think that the next generation and those younger generations coming through, where they, regardless of how amazing you think the SEND reform is, it's better than it was. And I know I can be really impulsive and really impatient, and I'm a perfectionist. So I want it all sorted out perfectly, exquisitely yesterday. And I like problem solving, but we have to work on the feel good about the progress. And that this is a foregone conclusion. I think that's the bit that we certainly hold on to. And we can stand on the shoulders of the giants of amazing people and organizations that have done so much work in mental health and gender, etc., that we can take a lot of comfort that change is possible.
And thank you for making all the change that you are making. And thank you
Trying.
for joining us on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, Ben.
Yeah, I've loved talking to you guys. Thank you.
You know what? I found that conversation really reassuring, because here we have a guy who took something like the drinks industry and picked it up, shook it around, and came up with Seedlip drinks and completely changed what the drinks industry looks like. And he's applying all of that knowledge and that competence to changing the lives of those who are neurodiverse. He is campaigning, he's getting the research done, he is going to Parliament, he's making our community heard, and that's a massively reassuring thing to know that he is doing that on behalf of all of us.
Yeah, I thought he was really inspirational, actually. And, we've talked about the importance of continuing these conversations around ADHD, and it just sort of shows that the positive reasons to keep talking about it and to keep informing and educating people and educating ourselves about where we are with ADHD. If you're watching on YouTube, then do like and subscribe, and you can send us a message there as well. And wherever you're listening, if you can subscribe to the podcast and write a review, it does really help. Thanks for listening, and we'll speak to you next time.